Well, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to get the opportunity to speak with you again. It's interesting that neither Bill nor Derek or I ever coordinate ahead of time what we're each going to talk about, and yet sometimes a natural synergy occurs, and um, that appears to be the case today because Bill's wonderful talk on moderation. A lot of what I'm going to say today is actually about moderation, and this part two of my day 6 presentation on the Great Tao, a better perspective. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it here. So just a brief summary of what we covered last week. For those of you who didn't hear or weren't here last week, Derek's book, The Tao of Happiness, is available on audible.com. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to check it out. It's a great book. I talked about a definition of perspective. We talked about what Derek talks about in the chapter about Zhang Su using nature to teach important lessons about the Great Tao, and how time itself is a good analogy for our limited understanding of time, is a good parallel to our limited understanding of the Great Tao, and yet we can glimpse it and learn more about it if we try. We talked about a perspective on attitudes. We talked about bad attitudes and good attitudes. We talked about a perspective on achievement. I talked about goals and systems, and how if the word goal creates a negative annotation for you, you should consider maybe a systems approach to avoid that without giving up your dreams or visions. I talked about a perspective on exercise. I talked a little bit about a perspective on diet. And so now this is where we left off, a perspective on proper amounts of sleep. And I'm going to share with you two extreme views, and then try to give what I consider the Tao perspective on this. So when I was younger, I used to say things like, sleep, there's plenty of time to sleep when you're dead. I'm too busy to sleep. And in my youth, I often got as little as about 4 hours of sleep a night. And I used to think that that was perfectly fine. And you might argue for a 20-year-old, maybe it is, but in retrospect, I really don't think it was. I think that proper amounts of sleep are important. The other extreme of that, and I actually know people who do this, I know people who literally pursue a 24-hour sleep cycle, to the point where they'll abuse recreational drugs to achieve it. I actually know people who do this. That would be the other extreme. The path of moderation, or the Great Tao perspective on sleep, is to get the just right amount. And for me, I shoot for 8 hours. I am an early riser, so I go to bed early, but I also wake up early. But I shoot for 8 hours. And it's funny, in this slide here, I have a baby sleeping peacefully there. And it's funny how babies often make a good analogy for Tao sages. And this is the second baby in this presentation. The first one was the one with the good attitude, and now there's this one who's just sleeping so peacefully there. It's funny how babies do make such a great analogy for Tao sages. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the Tao perspective on luck. Now, on one extreme, you can hear people say things like, life is all luck. It's 100% luck. And there's nothing you can do about it. Now, I've heard people espouse that idea. The other side of that is people who generally are very successful in life. They'll say, life isn't luck at all. I make my own luck. That would be, I think, the other extreme. So what's the Tao perspective on luck? Well, I would say, again, with the Tao, things break into polar opposites sometimes. But the important thing is not to see one as good and one as bad, or to avoid extremes, but to seek the balance. And, to a certain extent, you can argue very skillfully that life is all luck. In order for Bill Gates to be Bill Gates, he had to be born with Bill Gates's DNA, to Bill Gates's parents, and have the experiences that Bill Gates had. When you trace things back to the source, you can easily argue that life is all luck. That's one way to look at it. Another way is saying that Bill Gates worked hard and he prepared himself to be successful at life so that when luck came his way, he was ready to take advantage of it. Because in a way, luck often has a lot to do with timing. So to me, the Tao perspective on luck, and it's why I put this slot machine here, is that I consider the perspective on luck to be this way. Life can be like a free slot machine. You don't have to pay any money to play it. You just keep pulling the lever. Now, what pulling the lever means can be different depending on what you want, but essentially you control your own destiny. Now, pulling the lever often involves, first of all, deciding what it is that you want versus wishing for it. When you wish for things, more than often than not, those things never get out of your head. But when you decide what you want, you're more likely to come up with a system or a plan that will help you achieve what you want in a balanced way. And that's the ideal thing. I mean, so pulling that lever may be working hard at whatever you want to achieve. It may be sacrificing fun free time for work, but as long as you do that in balance, you're pulling that lever every day to get where you want. And sooner or later, those wheels are going to line up and luck will be there for you. But you have to play the odds by being ready for it when it comes. And I would say that's the Tao perspective between the two extremes. At least that's how I look at it and how it's worked for me as I look back at my life in retrospect, as I get some distance. So now the next thing I want to talk about is a perspective on generosity. And I'm going to share with you when it came to financial wealth, when I was younger, I had a very ignorant perspective on generosity. And I'm going to share it with you. And then I'm going to share with you how my perspective has changed over the years, particularly after studying and learning and doing my best to practice the Tao teachings and incorporate them into my daily life. So back in the day when it came to wealth, I used to think that there were three categories. And to me, those three categories were either selfish, foolish, or being a burden to society. That's the way I actually used to look at it. And between those three choices, I used to say, hey, selfishness is the way to go. Because unless you achieve your own financial wealth and stability, you can never help anyone. You just end up being a burden. Now, that perspective wasn't completely devoid of wisdom because, again, as I tried to say earlier, with the Tao, it's not about selfishness being bad and generosity being good. It's not about that. We don't. Ideally, you don't want to look at things as good or bad, but the idea is, what's the balance that makes it just right? And so my perspective was rather ignorant because it ignored something, and that's that generosity isn't just about money. If you're not financially stable enough at the present moment to write a check for the things you want to write a check for, well, there's other ways you can help. Bill gave a wonderful presentation a few weeks ago on giving at Christmas time. And one of the points that I loved that he made so well was that a lot of being generous and invoking the karmic mechanism is about giving of yourself. That's actually better than a monetary type of giving. And I think that's very true. So my perspective is to give where you're able to give. And if it's not financially, that's okay. But there's other ways to give. I think part of the reason why Derek and Bill and even myself to some extent take the time, sacrifice the time to prepare presentations and share them with you is because we sincerely do want to help others the best we can. And the way that we've chosen to do that is to express what the Tao teachings are, and so that people are free to give them a try. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn by speaking for Derek and Bill, but I think like me, they feel as though these teachings are so wonderful. They're so life-changing. They've made such a difference in our lives that we just naturally want others to experience it. And that's my motivation for when I get up, stay up late on a Friday night or get up early on a Saturday morning to put a presentation together. It's because I sincerely want to help. And it's not a monetary type of gift, but it's still a way of giving. And so I think the Great Tao perspective on generosity is to look at every aspect of your life and figure, how can I invoke what might be referred to as the karmic mechanism? How can I give so that I'm able to give more? And that's really a good way to go. All right, so I'm going to move to the next thing. So a perspective on failure. So failure, again, seems like something that if you take as an extreme, you might want to say, well, failure is just bad. There's nothing good about failure. Failure is awful. Success is good. Failure is bad. But again, I would suggest that moderation is really the way to go here, and to realize that failure sows the seeds of success. I know it certainly has in my life as I look back on my life and I think of all the colossal failures of my life. And when I think about it, honestly, I have to say, somehow I've managed to keep failing up. And the reason why I've been able to do that is because I've learned from my failures. And of course, I still fail, but I'm okay with it because I know that it'll teach me how to succeed even when I fail. And you know, one of the examples that I'll try to share a couple of examples if there's time here, but the glaring example for me is a personal one of what I consider the great relationship I have with Wendy. That success was sown by the failures that I had in my first marriage. I learned the hard way, but I learned it nonetheless, that you can't cultivate a happy, balanced relationship if you want to spend 16 hours a day on your career. It'll give you financial wealth, but at what cost? You know, that's a hard lesson to learn, and unfortunately I had to learn it the hard way. But I did learn from it. And so the failure of my first marriage set up the success of my second one because of what I took from the failure. And that's the Tao perspective, really. You have to learn from your failures to succeed, because inside of failure hides the seeds of success. But you have to be aware, you have to look. And a lot of that has to do with getting calm first, to being able to see it, to not let emotion govern your life, to see failure correctly, and to do the right thing with failure. That's important. The other great failure of my life I will share with you is the 12 years that I spent in corporate America. You know, what I now affectionately refer to as the rat race. It's hard to believe now that I used to put on what I now refer to as the penguin suit and work to climb the corporate ladder at all costs, and how terrible all of that really worked out, and how I consider it an actual failure. Yet I managed to turn that failure into a successful career that I'm very happy with right now. And the reason why I was able to do that is because I took the skills that I learned in those 12 years and I bring them to what I do now. But the lesson that I learned, that I learned the hard way, is one of balance and moderation. It's okay to go at things hard. It's okay to go at your career, you know, full-fledged, full bore. But you have to have a life of balance. You have to have appropriate amounts of rest and enjoyment. And there's no greater joy than the time I spend with my wife and my kids. And if I was still of the mindset of spending 16 hours a day at work, I wouldn't be able to enjoy that. But fortunately, I learned from my failure. And I was able to, those 12 years in corporate America were not wasted time. There's plenty of things that I learned along the way that help sow the tools of success that I try my best to invoke today. But I've learned to do it slowly, moderately, not in extremes. You know, the Tao is so much about balance and finding how to do it just right. Okay, so I want to sum it up if I can now. I'm going to go over the summary slide again, even the things that I talked about last week, and then hopefully cover all the things today. And then I want to add something new to this presentation that I haven't done before, so I'll talk about that briefly. Okay, so when it comes to the Great Tao, recognize that our human perspective is limited. Time is a great example of this. Attitude plays a huge role in how our lives unfold, so it is worth paying attention to it. If your attitude is bad, come up with a system for cultivating a good attitude. It will be like inviting the Great Tao into your life. It is okay to have dreams and visions for the future, aka goals. Try using the systems framework to achieve them instead of the goals framework if the word goals stresses you out. Diet and exercise are tied to how we feel and act. These two aspects of life are vital and have a huge impact on our energy levels. Getting the proper amount of sleep is tied to our energy levels as well, and lack of sleep will throw us out of balance. Luck is everything and nothing. Play the odds. Be ready for luck when it comes, and it does come to us all. But it won't matter if we're not ready when it comes. Selfish and generous are two sides of the same coin. Cultivate generosity in a wise way. Success exists in the fabric of our failures. Rob failure for everything it has to offer. So I want to end this presentation with something I'm adding here. It's what I'm calling a tribute to Carmen's Corner. Carmen, if for those of you who've been in these meetings for a long time, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And Carmen used to give wonderful presentations on Sunday, and they were just, I missed them so much. I enjoyed them so much. But one of the things she would always do is she would end her presentation with a recipe. And I'm not going to do that today, though I will try to throw this in every once in a while. Instead, I'm just going to add a little food tip. It's actually something that I have incorporated into my own life. And it sort of stems from another failure of mine, and that's the failure of being a type 2 diabetic, which I always tell people is a self-inflicted illness, and truly, in my case, it was. So the thing I want to talk about today is dragon fruit, and how it's something that I've discovered works very well in regulating my sugar as a type 2 diabetic. And if you're not a type 2 diabetic, I still would encourage you to give it a try, because it may prevent you from ever becoming one. So dragon fruit is grown in Southeast Asia and in Mexico and in Central America and South America and in Israel. It's good for regulating blood sugar levels, as I just said. It's easy to prepare. I literally cut the top and bottom off of it. I peel it, I cut it up into 6 pieces, and usually I eat at least 2 pieces every morning. Sometimes I'll even eat a couple in the evening if my blood sugar readings aren't where I want them to be. It's low in calories, so it won't, if you're working towards a goal weight, you don't have to worry about it being a high-calorie food that's going to derail you. It contains numerous nutrients, including vitamin C, phosphorus, and calcium. It's high in fiber and antioxidants. So this isn't a recipe, it's just a recommendation of something. I've been very fortunate in that there's an Asian market near where I work, and I'm able to get it very inexpensively. It's about $2.69 a pound. If you find it in a regular supermarket, sometimes it's as much as $11 a pound. So it can be very expensive. But if you're a type 2 diabetic like I am, or if you want to avoid becoming one, it might be something you'd consider giving a try to see how it works for you. Okay, so I want to end the presentation with a book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. Okay, so there it was, The Great Tao, Day 6, A Better Perspective, Part 2. I hope I was able to say something that was of use to you, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.
I definitely want to chime in on the use of words in describing that which we want to accomplish in life. Definitely it's true that a lot of people I encounter, they find words like goals to be highly stressful. So when I talk about accomplishing goals, they'll be like, well, I don't want to set, expectations on myself. Then I think that, well, perhaps I need to use a different word. So I would ask them, well, how about if I say end result? Nope, that's also not good. I don't want to define what I'm going to get when I get to the end. And, the word end seems to have such negative connotations. So then I would say, well, what about like outcome? No, that's still not good. Okay, so what ended up happening is that if I were to, switch around and frame it in a completely different context and say, well, you have some dreams that you've always had. There are certain things that you idealize, that you have a vision of the future, and that seemed to do it. So when I talk about having a dream or a vision for the future, I'm really talking about having a goal to be accomplished. But somehow, having a dream and a vision is not something that brings about a whole lot of stress. Why is that? I don't know. Perhaps it's the language, word associations that we have. Goals, seem to be associated with a quota that you have to meet, expectations that's been placed on you, whether from your employers or society, relatives, friends, or whatnot. So that's what causes the stress. But if you have a dream or vision, well then, hey, you're talking about something different. That's uniquely your own. It's something that you generated yourself. It's something that you know that you want, that you always wanted. So somehow that gets past those negative, artificial mental barriers that we have. So I want to suggest to everyone that if words like goal and results, if they don't work out for you, try, the dreams and your vision for the future. Those, I think, are very empowering words.